So here's my main growing patch. It's about 4,000 square feet. I got some corn doing pretty well already. That's a second generation landrace corn. If you don't know what that means, and maybe I'll do a whole video about that later. But today I'm fixing to plant my cassava, and that little first ridge right there is a row of peppers that I just planted the other day. So this space in between that pepper ridge and the corn is going to be my cassava patch. So I got to do a few things. There's some Seminole pumpkin and there's some watermelons that self-seeded in this patch, and I'm just going to let the ones that are established continue going. And then I gotta bust out the wheel hoe and clean it up a little bit, and then I'm gonna spread compost in the spots that I'm gonna grow the cassava, which is gonna be about 5 rows of 4. I don't know, I still gotta figure that out, but I'm gonna clean it up and then I'll go back in the woods and get some cassava canes. Here's some of the stuff that's self-seeded. That is a Seminole pumpkin, that is a watermelon, and all that is roselle. This was where the roselle was last year, and I already just wheel hoed a bunch of that, but there's tons of it in this patch. So I'm getting rid of that. I'm gonna leave the pumpkin, leave the watermelon. I'm just playing around it. So I think I'm gonna do, I got space for 5 to a row, and I got a bunch of compost. I'm just gonna go ahead and drop compost in spots that I'm gonna plant. And then when I'm ready to plant it, I'll grab the garden rake and mix it in with the sand so it has a bunch of organic matter. Today I'm gonna plant the cassava that I showed you that I overwintered in the last video. What I like to do is intercrop black-eyed peas in with my cassava. The black-eyed peas usually are played out by July. They get this rust and they stop producing and start dying off. And that's right around the time the cassava is getting big enough to shade them out. So what I like to do is plant a cassava, and then on each 4 corners plant a black-eyed pea. And then it'll kind of feed the cassava roots nitrogen, and by the time the cassava gets big enough to shade them out, it's kind of the end of the black-eyed pea cycle anyway. I'm also going to plant black-eyed peas in between the rows, and those will keep going. They won't get shaded out for a long time. And then I'll probably plant some peanuts and snake beans in that same patch where the cassava kind of ends and the peppers begin. So right now I'm going to go through the stack of cassava that's leaning against the oak tree and pick out some candidates, and I'm going to plant 20 of them. And then the rest I'm going to leave there, and my cousin wants some of my canes, so I'll give whatever he wants to him. But I'm going to get to it. There's the cane stash. It looks like the leaves are growing on the bottom right side. If you missed that other video, that green down here, those are cassava leaves, so I'm going to start from that side. I'm going to take this hog panel off and try to carefully remove some canes. I got some loppers here. I'm just going to use the loppers to get clean cuts. If I use the machete, they'll splinter, and I'm just going to try to keep it clean. So here's my bundle and my wheelbarrow. And I don't know, these kind of do seem dried out. But I mean, we got this growth going on the base. Will I have enough for 20? I don't really know. I'm gonna see. I'll cut some in half. And we'll just give it a go, see what happens. Well, I went ahead and I planted the ones that looked the most viable. And then I cut the tops off of, so if I had one that had roots and green on the bottom, I kind of cut it in half, planted the base, and then planted the upper part, which is more questionable than the part that had roots. The lower half seemed to look the most viable. The upper halves looked pretty dried out. But I forgot about, I have some other canes that I buried in protein powder canisters. And I dug them up when I planted the corn. They've been sitting in the garage, so let's go check out those things and see what's going on with them. When I set up my cassava cane patch there by the tree, I also buried some in these protein powder canisters. I just cut the canes to size and filled them with dirt and buried them in the cassava patch, which incidentally is now the corn patch because I rotate everything. So before I planted the corn about a month ago, I had to dig these up. So they've been sitting in the garage and I have not looked at them yet. So I'm gonna open them right now and see what they look like. Oh, got some mold and we got some stink of alcohol. So they're probably rotting in there. I'm gonna put the phone down so I can use both hands. Very interesting. Quite moldy at the base, but this is pretty nice and wet. It looks pretty good actually. So let's get the rest of them out. I can smell the alcohol coming out of the container, but these are not too badly rotten. I'd say these are probably pretty good. They look better than the ones that were leaning against the tree. So I think I'm gonna go plant some of these next to the canes that I think are questionable, that did not really have growth. And if one does not grow, maybe one will, and I'll just kill the one that's doing poorly. These ones are kind of covered in dirt. I can't really tell where the node is, which way's up or down. So I'm just gonna plant them sideways, like yay. These ones are vertical, I can tell which way's up and down. So I'm just planting those ones horizontal, covering them up with a little bit of dirt. Some of these canes that were in the woods did not have roots or leaves, like this one. So I just kind of, it was a leftover, and I don't know how viable it is, so I just stuck it in the ground and kind of gonna check on it and see if it grows anything. Because a lot of times when you're cutting down canes in the fall and you just leave some on the ground, they start growing again, just laying there on the ground. So you never know. I'm gonna set up the sprinkler now and water this patch in. And that's all the time I got today, so we shall see what happens. Very interesting. All right, well, I got the sprinkler doing its thing. I'm gonna let it water all this in, and then in a few days when I get more time, I'll plant the black-eyed peas and peanuts and snake beans and stuff. So I'll probably make that one whole long video, so I'll be back in a little bit.